Welcome everybody to today's SPOC webinar for the first time together with the Council of Palm Oil Producing Countries. My name is Marieke Leegwater and I'm honored to lead this webinar. This time we'll talk about deforestation-free commodities, the case of palm oil and the latest state of play in Indonesia and Malaysia. It's a topic very close to my heart. It's very interesting times. We've heard in the media that deforestation for palm oil is on a 4-year low. Some even say 20-year low. However, the prices are high, and among others, by the war in Ukraine, but also to recent droughts and climate instability in other crops. So I'm really happy we can discuss this theme today, what's happening in palm oil and deforestation in Indonesia and Malaysia, with actually 4 very exciting speakers. I know there was 3 in the program, but we decided to improvise and have 4. So each of them will be given the floor for 10 minutes in the coming hour. And then there will be room for small Q&A at the end of each presentation, and at the end we have about half an hour for discussion. So our speakers today are Niels Wielaert of Satelligence. We will hear the latest state of play regarding deforestation for palm oil from him. Then we have Dr. Gunarso from ex-director of Tropenbos Indonesia, and Dr. Ruslan from MPOC in Malaysia. A really well-known expert, both of them in the industry, hearing their perspective. And then finally, we'll have Bart van Assen of Kayon, Each Tree Matters. And he's a very experienced auditor, so he can tell us all about, let's say, what do the standards ISPO and MSPO really deliver in practice, and how does that work? And with that introduction, I would like to give the floor to Niels Wielaert, our first speaker. Niels, are you ready?
Oh, good.
Yay.
Thanks.
There you go.
Yeah. Great pleasure to be on this panel. Hi, everyone.
Thank you,
Can you see the
Niels.
slides?
Yes, but they're not
Good.
in presentation mode yet, I think.
Nope, but now I am.
Are you? Oh, yeah. Thank you.
Good, yeah. So today we would like to talk about also the narrative around palm oil. Some people thinking, some people are widespread around the world, that palm oil is maybe the biggest contributor to deforestation. But what does the data say? So I make a statement because when we look at the EU regulation and the public polling that has happened, the public consultation, we can see that the results are shown here. And we see that palm oil is way far above everything else, with 80% of respondents saying, yeah, this should really be in the EU regulation. We must halt deforestation due to palm oil. But if we look at other commodities like pulp and paper, we see only 14% have commented that it's important to look at that commodity. But if we look at reality, what can we see? That first of all, if we see the impact of deforestation, we can see all on the right, the very big circle. We see that cattle for beef has around 10 times more deforestation than all the way on the left, the small circle, 270,000 of palm. And if we look then at what the sector is doing in terms of NDPE and other sustainability commitments, we see that the palm oil sector is actually leading in terms of the number of commitments, especially if you look at soy and other commodities, cattle. There's still not so much pledges for sustainability. And I think this is kind of summarizing kind of a skewed perspective between the public and policymakers, not to forget, and what is actually going on. But okay, commitments and pledges, that's the best first step. but what is really happening in practice. So with the challenges, we're working with satellite imagery. So I'm going to show you some results of our analysis using satellite imagery of different sources for the past 22 years. There we scan each 10 meter of the Earth every day. We'll focus on Indonesia, Malaysia today, but the second thing is to put that within the context of supply chain data. So with a lot of partners on the ground and experts, we're collecting the plantation boundary data from industrial plantation, but also from smallholders, also the mill location, refineries, etc. And putting that together, we can do analysis. So just to make it a bit more concrete, this is satellite imagery, and then we do our processing to say, okay, what kind of type of forest this is. This primary forest or is this young regrowth, very degraded area? We also map using the satellites where all the planted palm is occurring, which is yellow here. Then obviously the 22 years of deforestation, and critically an overlay of, in this case, where are all the palm concessions, where are the pulp and paper concessions, where are the mining concessions. So here you have the full collection of all these concessions that we used in our analysis. So what did we find for Indonesia? We saw that there's a marked increase in palm-driven deforestation since the 2015 NDPE commitment cutoff date. So those are the darker colors you see here.
Sorry, Niels, what are the darker colors?
Those are the last year since that's 2016, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21.
Okay.
So we have emphasized those years, and then you can see that the bars are not as high as the previous years. You can see that the highest bar is 2015. Why is that? It is because there were huge fires that affected, especially we're looking inside and outside of palm concessions. So we're looking at where is palm growing and was there any deforestation for its planting.
Yep, clear.
So
I also really like that you have the outside palm oil and inside palm oil concession.
Yes.
That's really helpful to better understand what's happening.
Yeah. And one of the main takeaways is that looking at these bars for every year, we can see that the level of deforestation is at a similar level that it was 20 years ago. So it peaked around, we can see that later, but in this case, we can see that it is a big peak in 2015. So that's very interesting. What we can also see if we compare it to the prices of palm, CPO pricing, you can see on the right, on the left, you can see that deforestation is going down. Interestingly, also for mining and pulp, wood fiber, but that is now it's around a similar level. It's around 25,000 hectares a year. The dotted line, again, is the NDPE commitment cutoff date on both sides. And on this side, you see that from 2019, prices increased significantly. The interesting thing is that David Gavot very recently also published a paper that confirmed the 20-year low deforestation. But their analysis only was until 2019, showing a correlation with CPO prices. But now you can see that it's going up and still deforestation is reducing. That's super fascinating.
We already have one question. And as you know, I like Spock webinars to be super interactive.
Sure.
So I'm going to cut right in. How do you know that the deforestation outside of the concession is actually for oil palm?
It is because of we map whether there's palm growing.
So
we know it's palm.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. We have also done, say, a forecast the possibility that it will become palm, but this is a whole technical discussion we can have later.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah. So if we look at other data, the slowing is not because of production volume. Volume increased. The yield is totally different story. I'm not touching on that, but it's also thanks to data we got from the MVO Netherlands. It's not because of, for example, a decreasing EU demand. That's kind of fairly stable, not slowing down a lot. So those are factors that people suggested. Hey, is it the slowing down to other factors? It's not these factors. We also had a look at the economic growth, which dropped significantly in Indonesia in 2020, but saw a really fast rebound. And more importantly, it's also not, some people say, yeah, but there's hardly any forest left. Then it's not weird. Well, there is quite a lot of forest left still in plantation, depending on where you look. Of course, in Papua, there's around 70% still left. Their forest remains inside concessions. So that's why these findings, they have also been found by Aid Environment and Gafo et al. What about smallholder? If we look at the past 20 years, we see that industrial plantations expanded faster than smallholder plantations, and that smallholders converted like 3 times less forest. And in this discussion, it's very interesting that our data shows that smallholders clear mostly young regrowth rather than more intact, disturbed, logged, and primary forest. Looking at Malaysia, we actually see a similar trend. That since the NDP cutoff, we saw a marked decrease inside concessions, and we also saw a decrease outside the concessions. So similar graph with the dark colors are the years since 2015 December. So there's a maximum deforestation in 2040. So I think if we look at all the factors, what we hear a lot in the sector is that recognition for achievements is due. A large part of these slowing of deforestation is because the sector is really serious about sustainability, monitoring, engagement on the ground, doing a lot of things. That's obvious. Of course, the moratorium on concessions is in play, but then in Malaysia, we see a similar trend. And if we also have to think about factors, labor restrictions are also, of course, a factor, a huge factor. But I'm not an expert in that. I just know that other information. So what's left to be desired? It's not only a sunny story. We can also look where there's significant deforestation still going on. And then we have some areas, for example, East Sulawesi, some districts in Sumatra and Sorong in Papua, where we see an uptake of deforestation. So we can focus with the industry there. Malaysia is a similar thing. We saw some concessions, more intact forest in Sabah, for example. Deforestation. Just to show that we can now zoom into specific areas. And also, we know, also because Chain Reaction Research and Aid Environment have been reporting on that there's a top 10 of companies that continue despite all these good trends to clear, for example, intact primary peat swamp forests like here. And of course, with the emissions, this is causing this kind of a risk also for the carbon and the Paris agreements. We see that primary forest is still being cleared. So the interesting question here is, okay, given the EU regulations and all, what is the perspective of the local agencies and local companies on addressing these ongoing deforestations that are still left? So I would like to leave it at this. Over to you, Marie.
Thanks, Niels. I guess that's a super interesting bridge to the presentation that's coming up by Dr. Gunarso. Because that's exactly what we wanted to have this webinar for. We see a lot of good trends, and I think you've been well able to substantiate them with satellite monitoring information. Deforestation is going down, but we don't seem to be there yet. And I think, demand in Europe can only do so much because, demand in Europe is 10% of the market. So I guess there's a very important role to play for both Indonesia and Malaysian government if they really want to drive change in this. And yeah, that's why I'm really excited to have Dr. Petrus Gunarso here, who I'll give the floor. He has a very extensive CV, been a researcher, researching in forester. He's a real forester if I look at his CV. So Dr. Gunarso, now retired, but still with us from Australia. We highly welcome your perspectives, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Marika. Allow me to share my screen then.
Yes, please.
Okay, is that there?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Marika. First of all, allow me to start with my presentation with two take-home notes. First is the 4C of the equalizer of the world. First is climate change. Second is COVID-19. Third is conservation. And then fourth is consumption. I've been working for C4, so I'm now using 4Cs. Secondly, the reason why I mentioned about those 4C is because the world is imbalanced. And therefore, I believe that the 4Cs are the equalizer. Secondly, 4Es. The solution to the world problem is 4Es. Engineering, hard and social engineering, economy, environmental, and empathy. So those E's are the solution. That is the take-home note for us for today, because what I'm going to talk to you is it's not directly what Niels is doing, because I did the same thing, but the time epoch is different. I started from 1990 until 2010, while Niels started from 2001, which is post-Suharto era in Indonesia, until now, basically like that. So there are two different epoch time. Therefore, I use my head using former Tropenbos, because that was when I did my study regarding the evaluation of three countries: Indonesia, Malaysia, and Papua New Guinea. Yeah, so that is the reason why I use that hat. You know, it's former Tropenbos. Okay, so to those who live in outside Indonesia, of course, you need to know that Indonesia is an archipelagic nation with more than 13,000 islands. The important part of the Indonesian information is about the uneven population distribution. So 60% of the population lives in Java, where Java is only 1/14 of the total area of Indonesia. So this is, I always bring this up in any discussion, because that is very important for you out there to understand that situation. The population speaks Indonesia, Bahasa Indonesia, with hundreds of local ethnic languages, located on the equator, suitable for tropical-based crops, plantation, forests, and biodiversity conservation. So historically, Indonesia was the European source for teak wood, for shipbuilder, and then timber, lumber, and so on. So that is Indonesia. So with understanding what is Indonesia, and then we can move forward to next step, the history of deforestation. Because if you talk about deforestation, it's happened in Europe, in America, Latin America, and Indonesia. So Indonesia start with introduction of large-scale mechanized forest exploitation by the US in Kalimantan, actually, in the late 70s, early 80s. Then followed by Japan, Korea, Europe, and many companies coming into Indonesia to implement mechanized forest exploitation. So that is since 70s, you know. So that is important. And then And then now, when we are in the 20th century, palm oil production is then often related to deforestation. So this is the debate that I always bring to the international community. Look at the time epoch difference between 70s until 2000, and then 2000 onward. So this is the reason why, although I'm a conservation by background, but now I'm helping, quote unquote, palm oil from accusation that palm oil is source of deforestation. So that is the reason why I'm now being what you get called by my colleague. Why you change your mind? No, I'm not changing your mind, my mind, but I'm now basically bringing the sustainability or conservation from the perspective of sustainable use, because not only protection, not only preservation, but sustained use is also important for conservation. Okay, so the reason why I bring climate change into discussion is that what is behind the introduction of no deforestation. If we are talking of no deforestation, are we talking about climate change? Are we talking about conservation? Or what is the ultimate goal? For me, the ultimate goal for the current situation is climate change. That's why I'm trying to bring that what Indonesia is doing on climate change. The updated national determined contribution of Republic of Indonesia is very ambitious. The target is 29%. We reduced 29% compared to business as usual in 2030. And then Indonesia also implement the moratoria. President Joko Widodo had signed the permanent extension of the moratorium in 2019. So they call it permanent moratorium. The moratorium prohibits the conversion of primary natural forests and peatlands for oil palm, pulpwood, and other concessions, and was introduced since 2011. So this is important for you to understand that Indonesia has implemented those, we call it permanent moratorium. Then, on top of that, Indonesia also implement conservation since 1970s also, and has declared about 27 million hectares, area the size of twice Java and Bali, as a conservation areas. So, in 2007 in Bali, we talked about REDD, reducing emission from deforestation and forest degradation. This is very important because it was declared in Bali.
Dr. Gunnar, I'm going to
yes.
try to speed you up a little bit, because you've been talking for 8 minutes now, so you have 2 minutes left.
Okay.
And I know that you have quite some slides, so maybe I would advise to pick 2 more, something like that. Thank you.
Okay, yes. So this is the REDD in 2007 in Bali. And then in Paris 2015, we agree to implement the principle of Paris climate change, which we call it common but differentiated responsibilities. So this is another equalizer for us, actually, that climate change is important. So I just basically skipped 2 slides on this, because this is just showing that Indonesia has a commitment to reduce 29% of the emission compared to business as usual. And this is important for you guys, that 60% of the reduction is depend on the forest and land use. So it means that we, by implementing the no deforestation or moratorium, that will be the effort for Indonesia in climate change. So those two basically you can learn later on the value. But the important part there is actually the commitment of Indonesia to reduce the emission, which is the problem of the whole world, right? So another issue that has been mentioned earlier, the deforestation rate is slowing down, or even actually we already implement what we call it moratorium. It means there is no permit from the government being given for any activities in converting the forest into different land use.
Thank you.
So
that's a very, I think, good
you
result.
said you gave me 12 minutes, isn't it? So
Yes.
2 more minutes.
Well, if you 2 more minutes.
Yes. Yes. The last two slides, actually, when you mentioned about deforestation free certificate, is that you have to carry out comprehensive, effective due diligence, and so on and so forth. This is now everyone is open, like Satelligence already did. You know, you can watch from the space about the deforestation in Indonesia. And this I think I do not need to explain on this, but actually what we need is not for international discussion. I think we need ISO rather than just ISPO or MYPO, because MYPO and ISPO is for the benefit of the country itself in managing the plantation. So as I asked that, what is new in the sustainable palm oil in Indonesia, ISPO, is the introduction of the voluntarily into mandatory. And then the other issue is that now it's more beneficial for the consumer rather than for Indonesia itself. So this independent and third-party issuance of ISPO has to be included, and then competent auditor has to be included, and so on and so forth. This seems to me is more driven from the consumer rather than from the country. But believe me, in the case of deforestation and no deforestation, I've been explained to you that that is the goal of climate change in Indonesia, to reduce the emission. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gunarso. You've done an impressive job getting many slides through in 12 minutes. Thank you so much. Also very interesting to hear about the moratorium. Let's immediately move over to Dr. Ruslan. Oh, that's a nice slide. Yes. Dr. Ruslan, you've been very active in many plantations. You've acted as the head of Sime Darby plantations even. Yes, you're bringing out your slides, I see. Herewith, I would like to give you the floor, Dr. Ruslan, who's now of the Malaysian Palm Oil Council, to tell us about the relation between palm oil and deforestation in Malaysia and what the Malaysian government is doing about that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Marike. First of all, I would like to thank the organizer for inviting me to give a small talk at this webinar. The title of my talk today is on the impact of oil palm on deforestation in Malaysia and the roles of certification scheme. Okay, Malaysia is a very small country with a land size of about 32.98 million hectares. And as of today, the total forested land is about 20.45 million hectare, or 62.3% as reported by FAO. And the total agricultural land is about 8.57 million hectare. And of this 8.57 million hectares, 5.89 are planted with oil palm. These are licensed operators. In Malaysia, you have to be licensed for you to operate or for you to run an oil palm plantation. But on top of this 5.89 million hectares, there are also an additional 310,000 hectares which are yet to be registered. So the reason being is because normally the growers will wait until the oil palm areas to be yielding before they apply for license, right? And the license are only granted when the oil palm trees are already yielding and they are ready to sell their products. So
Dr.
as we all,
Ruslan, can I ask you one thing? The presentation is not yet in the what we call presentation mode, and it looks nicer if it's in presentation mode.
hang on, let me check how to do it. I can't get to see it.
At the bottom left.
Okay, is that it? Is it okay now?
Yay! Good job.
All right.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. All right.
You were telling about the areas.
Okay, the areas. Okay. The industry is a very important industry to the country, and in Malaysia, 73% of the planted areas are managed by private companies or government-owned operative, and only 23% of those are managed by the smallholders. And as I said, this is a very important industry. It contributes to about 20 to 25 billion USD to the nation's economy. Okay, this is the most important slide of my presentation. You can see here that the oil palm industry started about a century ago, where it was first planted as ornamental palm, and it was the French who actually started the commercial plantation of oil palm. And during the early years of plantation, majority of I would say that almost all of the planted areas originated from forests. Okay, and this continues to be to about 5 decades. But starting from 1975, we can see a very marked decrease in the growth rate of the oil palm planting areas, where we see a steady decrease in the total growth rate. And today we have, for 2020, the recorded growth rate was at 1.2%, right? And this is very important because we can see that we are not expanding oil palm anymore, in view of the accusation that has been put on oil palm and by the NGOs, environmentalists, and also by the competitors of the crop. Today,
Dr. Ruslan, it's not so clear on my screen, but the 1.2%, which year is that?
2020.
That's 2020. And 9.8% is?
It's 1975.
Wow. Okay, thank you. Yeah.
All right. Okay. As we all know, we have actually initiated the Malaysian Sustainable Palm Oil in 2013, which covers the oil palm plantation and also the mills. And as of December 2021, the total area that has been certified MSPO is at 5.15 million hectares. And of the 455 oil palm mills that we have in Malaysia, 433 of those are certified MSPO. All right. As I mentioned earlier, when we first started planting oil palm in the country, almost all the areas that we planted with oil palm came from forests, right? And this continues for 5 decades. And in 1975, we have seen that the percentage of greenfield is steadily decreasing. We have more and more brownfield expansion of palm oil, simply because the non-productive crops like rubber, cocoa, and paddy has been replaced by oil palm. And by 2020, we have a very small percentage of new areas planted from greenfield. And this is very significant. All right. As mentioned earlier, oil palm has been the favorite target for environmentalists, NGOs, and competitors to the crop. So in 2019, the government came with what we call as the Malaysia Green Deal. In the Green Deal, it was decided that the total oil palm planted areas will be capped at 6.5 million hectares. Meaning, once we reach the 6.5 million hectare mark, there will be no new planting of oil palm in terms of new areas. You can replant them, but you are not allowed to plant additional areas. And whatever new planting that we have decided on, you are not allowed to plant them on peatland areas. There is a total ban on new planting of oil palm in peatland areas. And similarly, there is also a ban on new planting of land converted from forests. And to improve the transparency of the industry, it is made that all the oil palm plantation companies, they have to make their map available to public access. So meaning to say that if there is any issues about deforestation, you can actually seek for their location of their plantation maps.
That's very impressive, Dr. Ruslan. So is that ban on new planting of oil palm in peatland areas, is that also inside existing concessions?
No, it's actually on new concession.
So no new concessions, but inside existing
you can't really change whatever that has been planted. Right? So whatever that has been planted, it remains, but on new plantings, you are not allowed to plant on peatland areas.
Okay, thank you.
All right. We talk about sustainability, we talk about deforestation. I would like to highlight what we have been doing in the country. Okay, as I said, we started our commercial planting of oil palm in 1917. And throughout that period, we have practiced good agriculture practices, practiced by all the planters. And these are continuously being improved, right? RSPO only came into the picture in 2004, right? RSPO talk about sustainability, whereas we have been talking about sustainability since we started planting oil palm. And realizing the some shortcomings in RSPO, the Malaysian government decided to set up what we call as Malaysian Sustainable Palm Oil in 2013, mainly to assist the smallholders, because these are not present in RSPO, where initially RSPO more or less left behind the smallholders.
Well, I'm going to quickly say I'm the chair of the RSPO Standing Committee Smallholders, so I can tell you that there are smallholders in RSPO, but they're not numerous, and that's an important point to improve. You're right,
yeah.
But they are there.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
So anyway, so we improved the system. We introduced the importance of smallholders among the growers because, as I said, 28% of the operators in Malaysia are made up of smallholders. And the numbers in terms of participants about 540,000 people. So that's the number of people involved as smallholders in the oil palm industry. So it is important for us to actually look at the role the smallholders have got to play. Okay, a little bit background on the MSPO. It was established in 2013. Initially, it was on a voluntary basis, but it was made mandatory in 2019, where every single drop of palm oil produced by the country must be certified. Okay, I can say that almost 100% of the big operators are certified MSPO. So the only challenges that we have are among the smallholders. So in terms of land areas, as I said, 92% of the land areas have been certified MSPO. And for the mill, 97% of the mills are certified. Okay, to give you some ideas, what are the principles and criteria of MSPO? It is very similar to RSPO, but I would like to highlight the principle number 5, which is actually on environment, natural resources, and ecosystem. Right? These are enshrined in the principles and criteria of MSPO. Okay, having said that, I think the biggest challenge in Malaysia is that all land matters are under the jurisdiction of the state legislation. So the Green Deal was proposed by the federal government, but in terms of implementation, we do face some challenges, especially when the state government decide to increase their oil palm planted areas. So this is a big challenge. Second, we have got issues with smallholders where we lack the awareness among them and also the finance. So to assist this, Malaysian Palm Oil Board, Malaysian Palm Oil Council, and Malaysian Palm Oil Certification Council are working together to create and improve the awareness among the smallholders. So we go around the country educating them, telling them why is it important for us to certify all our planting areas. And so far, we have been getting quite good support from them. And in terms of finance, the government has put aside a big amount of money to assist the smallholders to get themselves certified, where all the smallholders are getting 100% assistance from the government.
Dr.
Okay.
Ruslan, I'm now going to ask you to speed up because otherwise it wouldn't be fair for Dr. Gunnar.
Okay, okay. This is my second last slide.
Thank you.
Another challenge is actually on the acceptance of MSPO, because there was always accusation that MSPO is government based or government linked compared to RSPO, which is actually totally independent. So there's always questions about the international acceptance of MSPO. So my take-home message to the audience is that oil palm is a century old industry. The early stages of oil palm cultivation and the era of rapid expansion of oil palm originated from forest. We cannot deny that. The expansion of oil palm post-1980s observed a lot of conversion from rubber, cocoa, and rice into oil palm. And the growth rate of oil palm cultivation is steadily decreasing and moving towards zero growth. Okay, the moment we reach 6.5 million hectares, there will be a zero growth of oil palm expansion. And thus, we would like to say that once we have achieved that, we can claim that we are a zero deforestation linked oil palm nation. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ruslan. This was very interesting. And with that, I would like to move forward to Bart. Bart, are you here?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
So Bart is our, let's say, final, let's say, last minute entry speaker, because we wanted to talk in detail about, let's say, what the MSPO and ISPO standards can bring to the table, and also RSPO to, let's say, save forest and prevent the link between deforestation and palm oil. We heard already the beginnings of the, let's say, the policy context by Dr. Ruslan and Dr. Gunnar. So personally, I think it's really impressive what both the Indonesian and Malaysian government are trying to do in this direction. Now over to you, Bart, to give us a more detailed insight. Thank you.
Yes, thanks for this opportunity, Marika. So I've looked at a very narrow scope at the three main standards for palm oil, ISPO, MSPO, and RSPO, and try to look what these standards say about forest conservation and conserving biodiversity. That looks like a very easy job, but we quickly get into a problem of defining what a forest actually is. And here the perspective of the Western mind comes into play. They have completely forgotten what their own dark and dangerous natural forests look like. And they are thinking that many of the forests look more like a picture on the left. This is a forest in Florida, and from a tropical perspective, we would not even consider this a forest. And this is what is really hampering much of the discussion in between tropical and Western countries, that we really need to be very clear in what we consider a forest. And I always like to prefer to talk about plantations versus jungles. It's much easier. Natural forests, let's call them jungles or wildwoods, and all the planted forests, let's call them simply plantations. It makes the whole discussion much easier, but that's going to take some while. In that relation, we can have a look at the different allegations being made about deforestation. And most of the times we see that activists use Google Earth as a great example, as saying, see, there is deforestation happening here. I picked one case from a very recent study by Aid Environment. I had a discussion with the team of Aid Environment on how they did this. And they basically say, well, we looked at the maps from the Indonesian government, and based on those maps and a little bit of looking at Google Earth, we decided that these were areas that were forests. And in this particular case, it very much looks like that areas that are mentioned as being deforested during 2018, 2019 were already land cleared around 2014. So 4 or 5 years earlier than the identified deforestation. So it's really important that we also start to addressing this issue where activists use Google Earth. I started calling it the pretty Earth fallacy. They use Google Earth and their techniques to make things look green. And based on that information, they say this is deforestation.
Sorry, but what have you been calling that? The
pretty Earth fallacy. So Google has their own pretty Earth approach.
Yeah.
They get satellite images, but then they work them. They rework them. They use several bands, mostly of the infrared, change it into green, and then everything looks very green.
Huh. The pretty Earth fallacy.
Yeah. If you use Google Earth, if you zoom out to planet level, you will very quickly see that you see no clouds whatsoever.
Yeah.
So Google uses some very, very clever algorithms to take out all the clouds, but they replace them with sometimes much older satellite imagery.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Wow. So why do they do that?
God, you have to ask Google that. I don't know. It is, of course, not very useful to show static clouds on their images. So yeah, I can understand that you would cut out the clouds. The problem is that they leave the shadows from the clouds.
But why wouldn't they try to? Why wouldn't they try to use the most recent available data?
Oh, they do. I think Google Earth is updated about almost daily, weekly.
Yeah.
The issue is that in the tropics you have long periods of overcast.
Okay.
On satellite imagery, so you will see large images of white. Basically, if you try to zoom in this case. During the rainy season, that would be about 95% white that you would see. Okay.
And then Google replaces that with nice-looking forestry.
Yeah. So if you start digging in, if you start really looking at these images, zooming in, you will see all kinds of mosaics happening, where the edges of the clouds are still somewhat available. And then within the clouds they have been cut away, and within those cut away areas you see mosaics of other satellite images.
Okay, thank you.
And to the untrained eye, they will very much look like the cabbage effect that an intact forest has. And many people make this mistake in trying to use Google Earth as a tool to say where deforestation is happening. We cannot use it that way.
Thank you. Good to know.
Oh, we've covered this. I can. So So using the same tool, but matching it with local expertise and field knowledge, we have had a look together with 3 PhDs. We used the same tool, Google Earth, to have a look at what kind of forest cover is there. And in the samples that we took, none of these samples still had any intact rainforest left. They were roughly divided into 50% agricultural mosaics and another 50% in heavily degraded to degraded forest in 1984. This was roughly 10 years prior to any expansion of palm oil happening in Borneo, and already a start of palm oil in Kalimantan. So this is really important information that we need to keep in consideration. None of these areas were intact forests that have been used, and this whole discussion is based on Google Earth, the pretty Earth fallacy, trying to say that these are intact forest landscapes. Then we come into the discussion: what is sustainability about? Is it an end? Is it a goal? Or is it a proxy? And we see more and more information coming out that sustainability is not really a goal by itself. It's much more important as a proxy, supporting discussions between oil palm concessions and orangutan orangutan conservationists. We see it also happening in the field between local communities and oil palm estate managers. We see a big change happening, big mental change happening when the oil palm estate managers start to realize that local communities can act in their benefit. And that's a massive change that is very difficult to document in research, but this is what you see on the ground happening. And another very important factor as a proxy is that organizations like RSPO are starting to engage with organizations like ISPO and MSPO. I mean, I think that's a very important tool. Under the FSC, we've seen that there was a lot of friction created, especially in Indonesia, by the superior stance that FSC took and said, we are the gold standard, therefore we know what's best. And I think Petrus can really feed back on that in the feelings of neocolonialism and racism that started happening over that. That is something that RSPO has been able to avoid. And I think that's a very crucial part that we also need to keep in mind before I start throwing the stick in the chicken coop at the moment. So what I've done is taken a look at the various documents that the RSPO, the ISPO, and MSPO have provided, and turn them around. I decided to look at what is the user friendliness of these documents for auditors. Started to look at the indicators, and based on that, have a look how well do the indicators identify the who, what, where, when, and why of each indicator. Based on that analysis, I did a very simple rating, red, orange, and green, a traffic light rating, where we find red means there are still many gaps, orange means there are a few gaps left, and green, almost no gaps anymore. I'll share the links to those documents in the presentation later on. Immediately I'm running into problems because at the time that this was done, 2019, the website of the the MSPO had closed. I could not get access to many of the supporting documents other than the 2030 standard that was around. And that was at that time being updated. And I suspect that if we would redo this analysis, we'll see that for the biodiversity angle, there will be a lot more orange rating under the MSPO standard. So we identified key effects: water management, zero burning, peat conservation, integrated pest management, IPM, waste management, rare threatened and endangered species and habitats, and greenhouse gas emissions.
But and was this the MSPO? I understand that recently there was a relaunch of the MSPO standards. Is this new?
There is now a 2018 standard. This is publicly available now, as well as the supporting document on that. So that's a big step forward. I just haven't had the time. This was short time. I haven't had the time to look through the standard in detail because this work is not easily done.
No.
You cannot match indicator to indicator. You really need to run this through
yeah.
several cycles and try to figure it out.
Yeah.
So with apologies to Dr. Ruslan, the weakest standard at that time, 2019, was the MSPO one. We found that in many cases it remained rather obscure about what exactly needed to be verified by the auditors. And what I suspect is that it banked heavily on Malaysian legislation. So I'll show this in the next slide. This is just to show quickly roughly what are the rankings for the three standards. There is a bit more information in the next slide, having a bit better idea of how forests are being addressed in these standards. And we see that ISPO and MSPO both depend very heavily on the legal settings. When you delve in them, you see that they are dependent on forest zoning. But the ISPO standard is banking already on the lessons learned together with RSPO, and they have integrated several requirements that disallow deforestation of intact forests, primary forests, and peatlands. That is something, maybe it's already in the new MSPO standard, that's something I did not find at the time. And therefore, MSPO was ranking slightly lower than the ISPO. An interesting part here is that from an auditor's perspective, we run into problems with the ISPO, with the RSPO as well, because RSPO is trying to use standards within the standard. We've now got HEV assessments that need to be done, which is a separate organization from RSPO. We've also got high carbon stock approach assessments that need to be done, and they can be done joint now. But again, these assessments are done mostly by consultants, and we see that the quality of the work is debatable. Let's keep it at that. So there is a serious additional cost and a serious additional risk by engaging with consultants on that. And it makes the work for an auditor far more complex. We need to now not only look at the standards, but also start looking at, okay, what does this other standard say, the HEV approach and the HGS approach. So that in a very brief review quickly, how the three standards compare to each other. And I'll quickly go back to the previous slide. Overall, I think the MSPO standard would really benefit from engaging with RSPO, if they have not done that yet, and see where it would be useful to strengthen statements about forest and forest conservation, even though they're probably very well covered in the legislation. It would really help that auditors are being pushed again, that they really need to cross-check again whether or not this legislation is being complied to. ISPO has benefited very much from integrating quite a lot of the, now I have to see, the 2013 RSPO standard, right? Yeah. If we look at the current ISPO standard, there are quite a lot of very similar indicators in it that were in the 2013 RSPO standard. So I think there is a very good example of where synergy is being created between a voluntary and a mandatory standard in improving standards as we go along.
Thank you, Bart. What an interesting and impressive presentation. It's remarkable to hear Dr. Ruslan saying peat conversion is now prohibited in Malaysia, but apparently this is not somehow transpired into the MSPO standards. I don't know, Dr. Ruslan, if you want to comment on that.
Okay, thank you, Marika.
Yeah.
Okay,
Shall I stop sharing?
Yes, please. Thank you, Bart.
Okay, as you're aware, the MSPO standard has been revised.
Mhm.
It was recently launched on the 18th of March, 2022.
Yeah.
And some of the issues that was highlighted by Bart is actually incorporated in the new MSPO standards. That includes the HCV and also on the PIT.
Oh,
areas.
wow. Very good to hear. Very good to hear. And do you do also auditor training, things like that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, we do.
Yeah.
The auditors, the certification bodies are made up of local and foreign CBs. And the auditors, we do the training. They are also a mixture between local and foreign. So I would say that some of them are also doing auditing for RSPO. Some of the CB's certification bodies are also from, doing business for RSPO as well.
Thank you. Thank you. That's really good to hear. It's so good to have you in this panel. I saw some, the Spook webinars are also, it's trying to be very interactive. So I saw some questions by the audience that I would like to bring to the table. And one of them is by Gusti Anshahari, I think. Gusti, do you want to unmute and ask your question? If not, I will read it out. How do you monitor and ensure that, it's to Dr. Abdullah as well. How do you monitor and ensure that the expansion of smaller or unlicensed oil palm does not convert the forest? So how do you prevent that smaller expand in forest areas? I think.
Okay,
that's the
can I answer that?
Yeah, please.
All right. Okay. I don't know about in Indonesia, but for Malaysia, there are 17 laws that has to be complied by the operators of the oil palm industry. Okay. From the very beginning, that is for the land clearing, seed selection, planting, uses of pesticide, and so on. There are certain rules and regulations that they have to comply, right? So when you operate on, when the smallholders decide to, let's say, if they wanted to grow oil palm, they have to obtain license for them to operate. If they do not have any license, nobody will buy their products. Okay, no mills will accept their FFB to be processed. So this is one of the ways that we govern the operators. So as I said, if the operators do not have any license, then they will not be able to sell their fresh food bunch to be processed by any mills in the country. Because if any of the mills that take these products, they will be certified non-compliance. Okay, that is one of the ways that we control any new openings of areas, coming from unlicensed areas. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. That's a very clear answer. I also see an interesting question by Ian Suwarganda. The question is to Niels. Niels, what trends, if any, do you see in Africa or Latin America?
Yeah, we have the data on planted palm, on forest, and on deforestation in Africa and Latin America. But I see a blog post forthcoming on these figures. We do know, however, if we look at the programs where we work, for example, in Africa, it depends a lot if you're operating in Cote d'Ivoire, which already lost a lot of forest, or in Liberia, where there's still a lot of green fields, right? There's still a lot of forest left. So if we look at trends, we know, for example, working with the industry and government in Guatemala, that there are, since 2008, all the 8% of the planted palm is growing on land that was deforested since 2008, meaning that 92% has actually been established on other low carbon non-forest land. So, and that's pretty much what we also see in the work with Solidaridad and the palm oil industry in Colombia, for example. So yeah, keep your eyes out for forthcoming
Flo.
statistics on Africa,
Good
Latin
cliffhanger, Niels.
Yep.
Thank you. Question by Kamal. Seth, what steps can be taken to make certified sustainable palm oil more affordable for consumers in countries like Malaysia, Indonesia, India, and China? What can be the role of governments and business, specifically financial institutions and banks? Wow, that's a very big question. Dr. Gunarso, Dr. Ruslan, is there anything you would like to comment from a Malaysia or Indonesia perspective? Like, how do you want to make certified sustainable palm oil more affordable for consumers in your countries?
All right. As we all know, I think you yourself can answer that. The consumption of RSPO certified oil is not something that we can be proud of, right? There are still a lot of CSPO which are not being taken up. Okay. I think in terms of premium, yes, when we first started RSPO, there was some premium, but now I don't think the premium is that significant.
Ooh, I've heard other people say different things about that. But yeah, I don't think it's appropriate to discuss that.
Okay. All right. But you see, the choice of certified palm oil depends on the buyers. Some buyers prefer to use non-CSPO. Some buyers prefer to use certified oil. And I've heard big companies, I would say Fortune 500 companies, publicly declaring that they will not buy certified sustainable palm oil. Right? So I don't know. I mean,
ooh, that's also very interesting, because I've been hearing the opposite. If you look at the WWF scorecard, I think most companies at least commit to buying 100% RSPO certified sustainable palm oil at a certain moment in time. Yeah. So I think the one thing I would like to, because I thought the question by Gusti to Dr. Ruslan on smolder and expansion in Malaysia was very interesting. I was wondering, Dr. Gunarso, do you want to comment on expansion of smolders in Indonesia? What is the Indonesian government perspective on that?
Yeah. Okay, thank you. For the smallholder in Indonesia, there are two approaches that government now implement actually. The first one is, of course, the law enforcement is important. The second one is actually Indonesia has decided based on what we call it spatial plan. So it is, if you already working, or the people is working on the non-forest, although that as Bart mentioned about the difference of tropical forest and American forest, if the forest itself is actually outside the forest area designated by the government, then we not call it deforestation, because they just use their own land basically. That is if it is legal. But for those who are illegal, I think I don't want to comment on the illegal. I mean, illegal is illegal, you know. They can do everywhere they want, you know. But for the legal one, if they convert, for example, this is much happen in Sumatra and so on. They convert rubber plantation. In my study in the past was there are huge amount, even also in Malaysia, they convert the rubber, mixed rubber, or we call it jungle rubber. From the space, it looks like forest, of course. They convert into the palm oil because they just changed the commodity. On this aspect, I think changing the commodity is the economic choice of the people itself. You cannot dictate them, you know. I mean, if they want to change to cocoa or they want to change to rubber or even rice, you know, it's depend on their calculation of economy. And if it is in their own land, I think we should not bother on how to deal with it. You know, I think that's my reaction. Thank you.
Thank you. So yeah, it's a very broad question. I agree. Yeah. Another question is by Prema Mogan, but I have to say I can't quite place it. So Dr. Ruslan, I hope you can. Dr. Ruslan, when will the maps be made publicly available? Do you know which maps?
Okay. Thank you for the question. Okay, Prema. This is a decision that was made by the government in 2019. Prior to that, the Malaysian government feel that the oil palm concessionary map should not be made public due to security reasons, right? But it was only in 2019 when the government decided that this can be shared to increase the transparency within the industry. And you know, then we all know, whatever the government decision, it takes years for it to be implemented. But what I can tell you is that the Malaysian Palm Oil Board have actually embarked on this program on getting all the planted areas in Malaysia to be mapped. And we have actually joined forces in terms of finance to get it done. I would say that it will take at least a few more years before it can be really be put for public access. But I would say that if you are interested, you can always request from the individual companies. Okay, most of the companies have got their map ready, but it is only the smallholders that we are having problems. Okay, so for the big companies, it is ready. So you can actually write to them and ask for their permission to get access to it. All right, that's the best that I can say for the time being.
Thank you, Dr. Ruslan. Can you clarify why is it so hard to kind of map the smallholders?
Well, you see, normally in all the plantation companies, mapping is done by themselves. Okay. Like, for example, when I was working for Sam Darby and also from Kumpulan Guthrie, we mapped out all our planted areas. We even have spot plans of the oil palm, individual palms. We have that. So it's just a matter of time. We put them into the computer and get it mapped out. But for smallholders, normally planting is done by them who are not really trained professionals. All right. So they don't have a proper record. And this will have to be managed by Malaysian Palm Oil Board. Okay, the custodian of the industry for Malaysia. So the Malaysian Palm Oil Board is actually taking charge of the mapping of all the smallholders. And there, as I said, there are about 23% of the land areas planted in Malaysia owned by smallholders. So it will take some time for it to get it sorted out. But I can say that we have seen progress of the of the mapping of the smallholders planted areas.
Thank you. I'm now curious, Niels, how do you do this? How does your company map smaller areas?
I think a key thing is cooperation, partnerships, right? It's not that we are a silver bullet from space. So it's all about working with local companies and local organizations on the ground. But to target where to go out with the GPS, we also use very high resolution satellite imagery with artificial intelligence to see where an individual palm is growing. So if we have small clusters of individual palms. We know
You
that
kind of
might-
guess. Yeah.
you can kind of guess and go there and walk with the GPS. So we try to make it more efficient that way.
Yeah.
Can I ask Neil? Okay,
Sure.
are you saying Neil? Are you saying that you have the map of all the individual pumps?
No, because the very high resolution imagery, of course, is costly.
Okay, that's my question. Because you see, there's a lot of accusation from NGOs saying that deforestation is happening, right? It is okay for you to look at small areas and say that that's for deforestation. But if you have a land area of about 5.89 million hectares, okay, it is very difficult for you to pinpoint where this deforestation happens. I mean, for Indonesia, it's a lot more challenging because the land area is about 14 million, 15 million, something like that, yeah?
Yeah, but then we talk about two different purposes. For deforestation, the 10-meter resolution data that we use globally is sufficient also to see the deforestation by smallholders. But we were talking about how to identify if it's smallholder palm. And so that's a difficult identifying deforestation versus identifying whether palm is growing there. So those are two different things. And identifying, especially also young palm, it's really tricky. So that's why we can't monitor the whole world with, say, 50 centimeter satellites, but we have to cluster it in areas where we know, based on local knowledge, that there is a higher density of smallholders. So there we can use a subset of a smaller area with that very high resolution imagery. But the rest of the world, for other purposes like deforestation, it's all 10-meter data, and that's sufficient.
Thank you. I think that's the good discussion to clear out.
Okay.
Always welcome. I'm looking at the, oh dear, this question might, too many questions at the same time. Time is limited. The question from Daphne. Do I understand correctly that it is now allowed by Indonesia to share concessions maps of palm companies? Do I understand correctly that it's allowed now by Indonesia to share concession maps of palm companies? Dr. Gunarso, Niels, Bart, who can answer this? Is it allowed?
The question is it allowed now by Indonesia to share concession maps? Actually, there is new request in the past few years back, I think, that concession has to share their maps. Particularly, they're asking, from the NGO point of view, they're asking for the shape file. But as far as I understand, up to now, there is no sharing of shape file to NGO except for research organization. That's my understanding. Maybe Bart knows about that. Thank you.
I think this is under the mandate of the Ministry of Forestry and Environment. They do have a new updated website now with the GIS data, but indeed it doesn't share shapefiles. What most people I know have done is they get the older land use maps and then redigitize those for their own purposes.
Niels, do you want to comment? Do you know?
No, it's of course also for Indonesia a question mark still. I think Dr. Ruslan commented on Malaysia, where at least there is a signal from the government in 2019 that there should be availability. But no, for Indonesia, I don't have anything to add.
Thanks. Daphne says the reason I'm asking is because this limits EU buyers to monitor on deforestation. So if these would be available, then probably, let's say, EU buyers can do a better job in distinguishing the volumes they can buy. So I guess maybe this is the
If that is the reason, if that is the reason, actually there is no difficulty at all to use the existing because in the past, when you look at the satellite image, it was very coarse. I mean, with a small scale. But now there are so many detailed GIS image that you can look at it, and with a high resolution, there are so many. Even people now sharing their drone, very low.
Yeah, but Dr.
type of
Gunarso, I
thing.
think it's, I think you can see from space,
Yeah.
what is a forest and what is not. But
Mhm.
I think what Daphne is asking is, let's say, is concession data available? So who's owning certain lands?
Oh, okay.
So that's a different thing, right?
Yes, on that case, actually, if you share the shapefile, it's just like if you are a programmer, you are sharing your source code. That to me is also too what you call it, too risky to share that shapefile to the community. But they can have it from, as Bart also mentioned, from the existing government website, where you can see also the border and everything from there. But of course, it's hard for the government to share the shapefile because it's a source code. You can change the shape if you need to, So this is it's just for protection. I've been learning on GIS also since 1988, So I understood on that. Thank you.
So the companies can share the shape files, but you think it's too risky for the government to share that? Is that what I understand? Because it can be changed.
Yes, I mean all shape files should be kept by the what you call it, the owner of the data. That's my understanding. Yeah.
So there would be a role for some sort of independent body to kind of collate these, I guess.
Yeah, I think what we hear from our clients and partners is that in the application process, some of these boundaries can change. And if you have different boundaries for the same area floating around, you get problems. So
yes.
in the end, there should be one organization saying, okay, this is the final boundary, but that doesn't happen. And I think to quickly comment, it's not the case that the boundary information isn't there, but for us in our work, we have to go at great lengths to go at local offices, to have local consultants, to have some of the companies to patch it all together. So it's not that the data isn't there. It is there, but it's super difficult to pull it all together. And also, I'm not sure whether there's a need, but that's me as a pragmatist, if there's a need to make everything public. For two reasons. One, there might be legal or security reasons or any other commercial reasons why companies will not do that. And in the end, what consumers want to know, has deforestation happened? So if that is a thing that the control unions and others of this work can sign off and they use available data on deforestation, then the answer is there deforestation, yes or no? That is what has to be public. Why do you need to have the boundaries public? The most important thing is there deforestation, yes or no? And what we also learned from this discussion is that it can be tricky if you have the pretty earth fallacy, if you have all these boundaries and people say, yeah, that's deforestation. Well, in fact, it's just an agroforestry change. Who's deciding that? So there's a lot of issues here at stake.
Thanks, Niels. Time, we have 1 minute, guys. I'm thinking we're kind of scratching the surface of this discussion.
Actually, there is one question that from Sander van something.
Yes, but I saw that.
You skipped that one, yeah.
Yes, okay. Dr. Gunarso, but I thought it is a bit outside of the scope of this discussion. Okay. But if you want to, I can share the details of Sander.
No, because that is also my question, actually. Frankly speaking, that is my question also. Yeah, because the impact from the oil palm to the deforestation is not as big as the decision of the government to moratorium, for example. That's so big difference. That from my perspective. Thank you.
Yeah. So the time is up, guys. At this stage, I would really like to thank all of you too for sharing your perspectives. Bart for flying in last minute, Dr. Ruslan for telling the Malaysian story, Dr. Petrus Gunarso for the Indonesian words, the words from Indonesia, and Niels for the very high quality information on, let's say, the real state of play. What I take home is that this issue is really not as easy and straightforward as it may seem, right? It's easy to say we will do no further deforestation, but then how to make sure it's done and developed in practice is really something that needs help, and we do it together. And I think I like the words raised by Dr. Gunarso. We need, among others, empathy with each other, understanding, to build that collaboration. And that's why I also like to thank my co-organizers, Dinka Bazuki of Sipupsi, who's done a great job in organizing this webinar, getting the speakers together. And I think that's the empathy and the build understanding we need for each other that will drive us forward to develop this. And we all need each other. Europe, we're buying it. Indonesia, Malaysia, producing it. And we can only solve this together. With that, I would like to thank also all the participants in this webinar. Thank you so much for listening. And once again, apologies for the time zoning confusion thing. Those who joining late, I promise we'll make a recording available. We share it. It will be on our Spock website. Thanks so much, guys. And I will leave it at this for now. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye
Thank
bye.
you. Bye-bye. Thanks. Thank you, Dr. Ruslan and Bart.
Thank you,
and
Dr.
Niels
Petrus.
and Marika. Yes, thank you very much.
Thank
Thanks,
you for the
guys.
organizers. Yeah. Thank you. Bye bye.